Welcome everybody. This is this is our last breakout session period time, and I'm thrilled to see so many people here to join us for this last breakout session. Our focus today is going to be about the family and the collective empowerment of the family. I'm going to be able to do a brief overview, but before I do that, I want to introduce our panelists. My name is Shea Tanis. I'm with the Coleman Institute, but I'm wearing a different hat in this session. I'm also a vice chair, or an outgoing chair of what's called the Sibling Leadership Network. And it's a network of siblings across the country that have come together to join forces and discuss with each other as they move forward how to support their siblings, support with and for their siblings. To my right is Danielle Frost. She's going to be representing today the parent-to-parent, the parent perspective. She's from the parent-to-parent of Colorado, and we'll be presenting that. And on my far right is my good friend Cathy Enfield, who is with Self-Advocates Becoming Empowered, the national self-advocacy group for individuals with cognitive and intellectual developmental disabilities. So that is our panel today. This is an exciting point right now. We represent the first of a series of presentations that are going on around the country. At the national level, we recognize that we are family song. We are family here. And over the years, there has been a separation of the advocacy for some points of family members. Now, there has been a need for this at points. There is a value in having separate groups and separate entities to advocate perspectives. What we're going to share with you today is we're going to demonstrate that, yes, there are within the family very unique perspectives. But although they're unique perspectives, what we've seen in the past when we talk about research, when we talk about advocacy, when we talk about policy, there has been the view that one family member speaks for all, which is not the appropriate presentation. We all have, as siblings, as parents, as self-advocates, very unique voices, but equally important to represent. So, as I said, this is the first of a very exciting trend that you will see across the country of groups of family members, self-advocates, and siblings coming together in policy, in practice, in presentation to demonstrate we have a collective voice. It is unique, we have different perspectives, but there are topics at which we all appreciate and want to move forward on. So we're going to start by demonstrating for you the unique perspective, why our voices are different. There's research out there that will tell you that proxy reporting for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities is not appropriate. When they look at the research, they will show you the difference in the reports and the message that is sent on behalf of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities that is not the same as what they want to translate. So I'm going to allow, we're going to go through this quickly, but again, we're family, we can figure this out and make it work. So I'm going to go ahead and allow Cathy to start. I'm going to prompt everybody here. We're going to have two things we're going to discuss. We're going to talk about why our perspective is unique, and then talk about take a concrete example. We're going to take our declaration as our concrete example as to how we interpret it differently. So I'm going to hand it off to Cathy to talk about why the perspective of a self-advocate is different from that of other family members.
Before I do this, I want to thank Shea for inviting me to this session. I thought this is important for all to attend to because often a self-advocate point. We need to work together. Now, say one thing to another. We need to work together on this. It's really important to do.
Over the past 30 years, the self-advocacy movement has become a true yet almost silent civil rights movement that for the most part is recognized by the general community. The Declaration is a lifeline for our movement. As the Declaration states, there are some 28 million citizens in the United States with cognitive disabilities, which include intellectual/developmental disability, autism, mental illness, stroke, brain injury, and post-traumatic stress. Perhaps 5 million are people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Research shows only about 25% of this group are receiving some sort of services. The majority of all people with developmental disabilities do not have access to current technology or communication opportunities. Tragically, a number of these individuals were exposed to this technology in school but find themselves without the resources to access it once they have transitioned out of school. As the world moves rapidly ahead with technological advances, these people are being left behind and are becoming even more isolated and left out of the community. The Declaration promotes much-needed actions which will increase our opportunities to build relationships and social capital. The Declaration supports the rights of people with cognitive disabilities to be integrated into the community and to be recognized as equal citizens and fellow human beings. This is still an ongoing struggle for people with disabilities, and many of the gains that have been made over the years will be negatively impacted if we do not have technology and information access. The Declaration recognizes that laws have been passed and policies changed to provide people with disabilities the same rights as all other citizens. However, if the resources that will enable people with disabilities to take advantage of these laws and policy changes are not put in place, they provide very little real help for many people with disabilities. The Declaration is a viable effort to help provide some of the major tools and resources needed by people with disabilities to take advantage of the advances in policy and legal decisions that directly affect our civil rights. It is a much-needed vehicle to help assure that these decisions will provide positive and meaningful effects on our lives and our efforts to be accepted as equal and contributing members of society. It is currently our best hope to avoid being cut off from our communities and forced into isolation once again.
Thank you, Cathy. So we're going to swap to talking a little bit about the Declaration, and then we can move into a little bit as to overall unique perspectives. So hand it over to Danielle, our parent representative. Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I got confused about the order. I again also want to thank Shea for inviting me to be on this panel. I'm very appreciative. Sometimes as a parent, it feels like people are afraid of my voice more than anything and afraid to ask me for input. So to be given the opportunity to give it is very exciting to me. So sometimes when you're trying to fight for what you know, at least when I've been trying to fight in the past for what I know, my 13-year-old son with who's profoundly affected by cerebral palsy should have access to it, can feel really lonely and frustrating to be like you're jabbing in the dark, hoping to say the right configuration of words that gets the ball rolling for things to happen in his favor. One of the things I love the most about the Declaration, having read it now, is that I feel like I have a document that can help me navigate the system because I have something I can point to and say and communicate with all these different groups and entities that we work with, that this is what Ethan deserves and this is what I want for him. It's written right here. I read once that the lifespan of a person with cerebral palsy is no different than anyone else unless they're nonverbal. And then the average drops between 13 and 18 years old. And we've already witnessed things like this. We've witnessed pain that has developed to the point of the cause being growing it from something very simple to becoming a near fatal event, simply because he didn't have the ability or the function to communicate what was hurting and where the source was. And I spend nights up, and I guess, and I cry, and I get frustrated, and we go to the ER, and then we spend weeks in the hospital. Also, the declaration reinforces something that's really, really near and dear to my heart, and that's Ethan's value as a communicator. Ethan is my son. His value has been tested and retested and failed miserably for years and years and years on all those testing platforms. Having to prove that Ethan is valuable enough to deserve financial investment into a communication platform of one form or another has just been a horrible experience for us. Honestly, even out in the community, when people see his computer that we were successful in getting, they see it, they get excited about the technology, and they ask him a question, and when he doesn't have the functional ability to immediately respond because of intellectual delays that go with his disability, they question his ability to use it. So he gets reaffirmed on a daily basis that he is not a valuable communicator. And all of that history accumulates in Ethan the impossible task as his parent to prove to him that communication is worth trying, is worth fighting for. And I've driven our speech language pathologist, who is an amazing person, has so many credentials, but I've driven her pretty crazy because I tend to be a very out-of-the-box thinker anyway. But the dream of Ethan using technology and being excited about it brings about some strange ideas for me. Access is so hard for him, and it takes so much crazy focus and motor planning for him to use the different devices that we've tried. I've always thought it was fun. One of the first panelists this morning talked about why can't the devices we use, why do they have to only be functional? Why can't they also be fun? And that just resonated so much for me, because if it's fun for Ethan, then he's so much more inclined to actually do it. Several years ago, Ethan fell in love with the movie Transformers. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it. And because I know him, because I am his parent, I could tell that what he was identifying what was resonating the most with him was the robot named Bumblebee, who had a broken voice box. And Bumblebee never actually communicated using specific words that were pre-programmed for him. He used sound bites from songs and from movies to convey his thoughts. I did find a couple of sound bites as simple as they were. One was just people clapping, and another one was wah, 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 that I was able to program into his talker onto a micro that would activate when he hit a certain pre-programmed phrase, like, oh no, was wah, 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 and the yes, I think that's great, was people clapping. And when those phrases were in his talker all by himself, he got no community response. Very little. If anything, it was just when people were testing him, he would get a response for using those. But with the addition of the sound bites, everywhere we go, people turn around and they get all excited, and it just creates an actual reward for him. It creates a reason and reinforces to him something near and dear to my heart, that he has value as a communicator. I've spent hours trying to clip other sound bites, but to be honest, my programming skills are not what they could be, and a lot of the software that are in some of these devices are hard to work with. I don't want to call them archaic, but they feel like they are. I've always thought that you could even, I don't know, if I had a Make-A-Wish dream for my son, and it's kind of a pie-in-the-sky dream, it would be that we could get James Earl Jones to record his voice on his talker so that Ethan could sound like Darth Vader everywhere he goes. I think that would be enormously rewarding for him. But anyway, I'm excited to have the declaration in hand. I pretty thrilled to use it. So.
Thank you. All right, thank you guys.
Can I interrupt and say there is a toy at Walmart that will convert your voice to
There you go. See, the technology. Okay, so I'm putting on my sibling hat. How many of you have seen one of these? Anybody? I know some people have seen one of these. Okay, this is called a time timer. The time timer came out about 20 years ago. My brother was in school. We were in the same school. I'm of the generation where he was included in school. It was that mainstreaming inclusion. So I will tell you, I learned about all these technologies. This is something I use with my children, and I'm going to use it for myself. So this will tell me I have 5 minutes left to talk, and I'm going to sit it here because I need some time management. But what this does is it demonstrates that siblings are of the newer generation of siblings have grown up in a world of technology, and that siblings utilize technology a lot more than, say, our parents do. But our siblings also want to utilize technology. This is an opportunity as we grow to come together. Now, siblings have the longest lasting relationship in the human lifespan. You understand that you know each other birth to death if you're lucky, but it is the longest relationship you have, but yet very unique. I will tell you, I have a very different perspective of what my brother's life should look like than my parents. Am I right? No. Are they right? Maybe. The person who's right is my brother. And it's my job to listen to him and hear what he has to say. But as we integrate technology, it's a different aspect for siblings. What I want for my brother, when I walk in the door at my brother's house, the immediate thing he wants is my iPhone. And he wants to play games on it. And I am lucky enough that I can function on my iPhone, not as well as my 2.5-year-old, but I can still function pretty well on my iPhone and demonstrate some of the things that he will want to utilize. But the challenge here is he doesn't have that access. But I recognize for him and I to communicate, for him and I to have fun, he needs to have that same access that I do to those technologies. So as he's grown, as I've grown, we've adopted similar technologies. But I'm in a position now as a sibling to be able to be that teacher of the technology. We all recognize that there are challenges in adoption of technology. When we look at the abandonment rate of technology, one of the main reasons technology is abandoned is because there's no training or follow-through of the training of those technologies. So what does that mean? That means that family members are the ones who are doing the training, are doing the follow-along, are doing the changing of those technologies. And a lot of times it can be a sibling who is doing those. Now, I'm not saying that siblings always will be involved. They just like a typical relationship in a sibling relationship, we wax and wane. We love each other one day, we can't stand each other the next. And so through the lifespan, that happens. But what we're seeing now as generations have moved, and we have a generation of siblings that have been fully included with their siblings from early age through school and education, we're seeing that a number of siblings are becoming the advocates in the professional world of disability and intellectual and developmental disability, as well as other realms. And so siblings are wanting to be included. They're wanting to have a greater role. But to be honest, we don't have the access of information that our parents had. We haven't walked through the system, per se, that our parents have. But it's why, as we move forward with technology, that it can be so important to have a document where we can say, yes, I know my brother wants to utilize all the technologies I utilize. He wants to utilize my phone. He wants to play on the computer. He wants to be able to have the fun toys, the monitoring toys, not the rehab type of technologies, but the technologies that we walk out and we'll see everybody playing with on their iPhone or doing something on their iPhone in this hall. That's what he needs. That's what he wants. And I'm actually in a good position to be able to support that, but not unless I have some backing and some documentation to be able to take to designers, to OGCOM folks, that says this is a human right, that this is a right that we need to be able to enforce as siblings and as family members for everybody to have that equal opportunity. For me to be able to engage with my brother as time advances, it's going to depend more and more and more on technology. I'm going to be able to Skype with him when I'm out of town. But he needs to be able to have that access. And I understand those technologies, I would say a little better than my parents, just a touch. But that's why we need to have a document like this that is embraced by all the family members, because we know the common goal is to allow that equal access. And that's what we're here to demonstrate is, although we have different perspectives, mine is the perspective of, I want to use technologies I've known about, time's up, and allow my brother to integrate with those technologies. It's a time when we need to be able to embrace a right that we all collectively, although we have unique perspectives, agree to move forward. So with that minimal transition, I'm going to go into why, as I speak, my voice is going to be different than Cathy's. And so I'm going to hand it over to Cathy.
To me, the Declaration means that people with disabilities in general and self-advocates in particular have an opportunity to keep pace with the advances in technology and to move forward in our efforts to achieve community integration. It means we have the opportunity to continue to work for self-determination in our lives so we can be directly involved in the decision-making process about proposed changes that directly affect our lives. It means the opportunity to retain and improve on the gains in freedom, independence, and individual rights that have been made over the past years. The biggest impact of the Declaration is to bring awareness of this critical issue to professionals, self-advocates, and the general community. It also provides ways interested groups and individuals can be supportive and get involved. The first step in solving a problem is to recognize there is a problem. The Declaration spells out the problem and provides a positive way to start moving toward solutions. The Declaration provides us with opportunities to start serious discussions about the issue of technology and information access and why it is an urgent and critical issue for people with disabilities. It reaffirms the rights of people with disabilities to be included in society and to be given equal opportunity to succeed. The Declaration provides the disability community a platform to speak about not only our rights to technology, self-determination, and information access, but also to specific ways this can be provided. We know that the principle of universal design needs to be incorporated into all information and communication devices as programs are developed. We also know these developments must be flexible and take into account the abilities of all users. Touch screens, screen readers, and voice recognition are all useful tools, but there are many of us who are not able to use them. Nevertheless, we are still entitled to a way to access this technology. The Declaration gives us the opportunity to open meaningful dialogue with professionals who develop and provide technology so they can better understand our needs and also so we can work to develop meaningful partnerships with these groups. The Declaration gives us the opportunity to include access to technology as a major need in our efforts to strengthen the resources available for supporting families of people with disabilities. It gives us the opportunity to be included in a serious effort to identify people with cognitive disabilities at an early age and to provide ways to make access to technology and communication available for them so they can grow up with these supports in their lives. To me, the declaration means appreciation for the support of many people who have given their time and effort to develop, support, and disseminate it. The declaration means opportunity for myself and other self-advocates to have a meaningful way to contribute to finding solutions to what is a critical problem for us. It means hope for the future of people with disabilities, as we work to take advantage of the opportunities the Declaration provides.
Thank you, Cathy. As you heard in Cathy's speech, that there's a unique perspective she has about the self-advocacy of the Declaration. So as we kind of discuss, one of the purposes of this panel was to demonstrate that we all have very, very different and unique perspectives. And Cathy just talked about how important the self-advocacy is for self-determination. And I'm going to ask Danielle to talk a little bit about how the parent perspective can be different from the self-advocate perspective and the sibling perspective.
So as a parent, especially a parent of a minor, at this point, the point of access, although considering Ethan's profound disabilities, it probably always will be, the point of access starts with me. It starts with, so our family, I feel like Ethan is fortunate because our family cares about technology in our household. In other households, families in his school, for instance, a lot of people in those environments, or I should say in their homes, don't care about technology. So it hasn't been something they've pursued, and nobody has come to them and said, your child needs this. It's always, everything that we've gotten has been because I went out and pursued it. So the pursuit of access, the navigating the systems, it's all very much tied to how committed I am to the process as his parent. I do think that family members in general are very important because they hold such a holistic insight into the client or their child or their brother or sister's life, into real life. And that information, I think, is pretty impossible to ascertain from any sort of test or an interview. To be honest, sometimes Ethan's younger sister, she's 12, has actually a better understanding of what his intention is that he's trying to say than I do even. And sometimes she is more persistent at forcing him to use his talker than I am. I remember when they were 5 or 6, you could hear her screaming at him from the back room, I'm not gonna give you what you want, I know what you want, but I'm not gonna give you what you want till you tell me with your talker, which is just so wonderful. But also as her parent, my expectations of her are only for her to go as far with this as she wants to. I don't expect her to be anything more in his advocacy than what her dreams are in this life. And as Ethan's parent right now, as it stands right now, I am the person that's most invested in seeing him succeed. And I also carry with me his entire lifetime of knowledge of things that he responds to and things that matter to him. I know what makes him mad, I know what makes him happy, I know what makes him silly, and I know what makes him frustrated. And my son is one of probably few children, I don't know, there's probably a lot of children out there like this, that couldn't care less if he impresses other people. There are a lot of people out there that will try to impress you by what they say or what they do, or try to show off to you, and there's a lot of kids with disabilities that'll do that. And because my son will just turn it off and ignore you, even shut his eyes and pretend that you're gonna go away, if he doesn't interact with you, a lot of people give up on him really easily. And I know this about him, and I'm the one person that's not gonna give up on him. His sister may get there eventually, she's not there right now, she's 12, so, that's okay at this point. But, I'm the one person that knows that if the person interviewing him is tall and blonde and female, he isn't gonna hear a single thing that she says. So, because he's 13 and he, Anyway. A developer might be able to build a language and a structure into a device that contains all of the communication that Ethan should have access to, but I can tell you, as his parent, why he doesn't care if the ball is red or green. And I can tell you why the system won't be successful for him, even if it has been developed in Stanford University or wherever. Ethan doesn't have the ability to, and at this point, even if he did, I don't think he would advocate for himself. I'm so grateful for the self-advocates that are out there. I've met I met an amazing person today. This is the first time I've met Miss Cathy, and I've met a few other amazing self-advocates, and I'm really grateful for all of the efforts they've put out there on behalf of Ethan and other children like him and adults like him. But I know that right now, in the moment, as his parent, I represent his best interest because I'm his biggest fan.
That's fair.
So I get to time myself once again because I need my timer. And this time, I'm going to put on my beeper so that I can't ignore my timer because I can be extremely verbose. So the sibling perspective. Why is the sibling perspective important? Why should siblings be even involved in the conversation when it comes to the development of technologies, when it comes to supports, when it comes to services? Well, there's a couple aspects. One of which I already mentioned, we're the longest lasting relationship of our siblings' lives. We're there along the way, the entire way. That meaning, as we see our parents age, there becomes what I call the third wave of transition. You have the first wave, which is early intervention into school. Second wave, which is that transition from school into adult lifehood. And then what I call is the third wave of transition, which is that when parents or original caretakers can no longer care for the individual, if there is a sibling available, oftentimes there needs to be that transition as to what's going to happen next. When we look at the statistics of aging caregivers, it's scary. We have seen now across the nation a trend of people with cognitive and intellectual developmental disabilities going into nursing homes prematurely because families have no other options of what to do as parents are no longer to care for those children. So we're seeing this issue of aging caregivers, and what are those steps? Well, I will tell you from a sibling perspective and working with other siblings across the country, as I mentioned, there may not be an interest in being involved in this, and that's okay. And oftentimes what we hear from our parents is, we don't want to force you to be involved. She's going to nod. It's not what I will tell you what my parents said. It's not your job to care for your brother. But the reality is whether my parents perceive it as my job, I perceive it as my job. I want to be able to participate and be as knowledgeable as I possibly can as we move forward. So the sibling perspective, when we talk about development, when we talk about supports and services, it's going to directly affect us in the future. And when we talk about technology, we can tell you what's cool and what's not cool. What are the other kids using? What are the other age-appropriate things? I can tell my Mom, you can't pull his socks up that high. It just is not good. You just can't do that. And you can't tuck the shirt in that much. But that's a different perspective than my parents have. Socks high when they were kids was fine. Now it's not okay. But that's why we are able to have that different, unique perspective. And frankly, the motivation, what we know about people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, that motivation makes all the difference. And oftentimes, siblings have a perspective of what's motivating. We are also probably a little bit harder on our siblings than our parents, saying, I will not let you talk without your talker. My brother has very difficult challenges with his gait and walking. My mother will let him hold her hand everywhere he goes. Him and I will sit and have battles over me not letting him out of the car to hold my hand because I know he can walk on his own, and I'm not going to hold your hand. But that's why I say it's a very unique perspective, and we can fight that way. That's what siblings do. We fight that way. We still love each other, but we can do it. So, if anything from this panel, what I want you all to recognize is that there is a unique voice of the parent, of the self-advocate, and of the sibling. And what we're nationally trying to motivate towards is from our organizations, these organizations, Parent to Parent, Sibling Leadership Network, Self-Advocates Becoming Empowered, are not all inclusive of all the family advocacy groups. But what we're recognizing as a coalition, as moving policy forward, is that we have to be able to come together, to be able to have that loud voice and be able to move policy forward if we're going to have any traction, if we're going to actually make an impact, because what we all know in Washington is numbers make a difference. And so as we're moving across the country, we are trying to collect all the family members together to move with this collective voice to really make things happen, to improve the future for our family members.